There's a large variety of different types of transceivers out there that we can use for our fiber connectivity. But there are also the transceiver cables. If you want to find out what types of transceiver cables there are and also what they're mainly used for, stick around and we'll check it out. Let's start off by looking at the differences between a traditional pluggable transceiver and the transceiver cables. Well, I guess it's actually quite obvious, isn't it? Because the pluggable transceivers, we've got that fiber connection here, meaning that we need to connect a fiber to it, whereas the transceiver cables have the cable already attached to the transceiver, meaning that a transceiver cable will always have transceivers on either side of that cable. Now, there are two main types of transceivers. Let's have a look over here. So to start off, we've got the straightforward cable, meaning that on either side of that cable, we have the same type of transceiver. But we also have the so-called breakout cables, which you can see over here. And the breakout cables actually work on the principle that some transceivers, so for example, the QSFP2800 gig, is technically speaking based on 4 times 25 gig. And then you can, as shown in this example, you can have a QSFP28 transceiver that then breaks out onto 4 times SFP, so in other words, 4 times 25 gig. Now, after having a look at the different types of transceivers, let's talk about the different categories, or to put it in a different term, the technologies. And we've got two main technologies. So we've got, on the one hand, we've got the so-called AOC, so the active optical cable, which is actually these normally turquoise multimode fiber cables. And we also have the DAC, so the direct attach cable, which is then this thicker copper cable, which is a lot of times black. Now, both of these technologies or categories have their individual pros and cons. Let's have a closer look over here. To start off, let's have a look at the DACs. Now, the DAC, as it is staying in the copper domain, we're actually not having to use those additional components. So we don't need the laser or the photodiode or everything else that goes with it. And they're the biggest advantages of the DAC. So in other words, it is very cost effective, and we've also got a very low power consumption. However, the downsides then are that we can only bridge very short distances, and it is very heavy and bulky compared to the fiber solution. And also the DACs aren't really suited for the higher data rates of 800 gig or higher. Now, if we have a look at the AOCs, you will actually notice that the pros and cons are actually inverted to those of the DAC. The pros are that we can reach longer distances, the cable itself is much thinner and lighter, and also it is suitable for the higher data rates. But the downsides then again are then that we've got a higher power consumption and it is more expensive. Now, what do we use transceiver cables for? Well, basically, we use it for the data center cabling. Why? Well, compared to traditional transceivers, it is a more cost-effective solution. And we also have the reliability aspect, because we're not having to deal with the fiber connectivity, so we don't have that fiber cleanliness topic. And also we have got a reduced inventory, meaning because instead of having the fiber cable and the transceivers on either side, we actually then only have one part. And obviously we also don't have that interoperability topic between the different types of transceivers, and also we have a reduced power consumption. Now, for what types of applications within the data centers do we use what transceiver cable? Well, for the longer distances, so in other words, the inter-rack connectivity, we will obviously be using the AOCs, so the optical cables, but for the inter-rack and top of the rack cabling, we then generally use the DACs. So does that mean you should only be using transceiver cables in your data center cabling? Well, obviously no, because pluggable transceivers are just as valid. So it is more a question of what you would like to be using for your data center cabling. Maybe it's just pluggable transceivers, maybe it's just transceiver cables, maybe it is a combination of both. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something today. If so, please leave a comment. Also remember, if you're looking for a transceiver or transceiver cables, check out our portfolio on our homepage. And last but not least, remember to follow us so that you'll get your regular dose of brain snacks. Until the next video, bye-bye.